With 4 weeks to go until Election Day, our series of leaders' interviews continues with the SDLP's Colm Eastwood and the TUV's Jim Allister. Welcome to The View. Tonight, cost of living or constitution. We'll hear from two leaders emphasising two of the big talking points of the election campaign so far. Colm Eastwood says there's no interest in border polls, while Jim Allister says the union is in peril. And with their analysis straight after each interview, Suzanne Breen and Alex Kane. Hello. The SDLP leader dismisses the opinion polls which consistently show the party struggling to increase its support. He wants to focus instead, he says, on the spiralling cost of living, health provision and the record of SDLP delivery. And Colm Eastwood joins me now. Welcome to the programme. You want to use the £300 million in the Executive's bank account that it can't currently agree on how to spend, to give every household £200 to help pay energy bills, an additional £100 for low-income households, as well as expanding free school meals. So targeted to a degree, but also giving lots of people £200 who don't really need the money. Why are you content with that?
Well, actually, most people who are in the most need would get about £500 because you would give them the £200 again. And by the way, none of this is enough because the people I'm speaking to are really struggling. £500 won't even be enough, but we have to do something to try to help people. Now, we could wait a year if you want, Mark, and we could design the perfect scheme where people like me or you wouldn't get any money. I don't think we've got time. This is an emergency. People need the money right now. That's what we're focused on. I think that's, frankly, what the people are focused on. But the first thing we need is a government. And right now we don't have one because Jeffrey Donaldson walked away. In the middle of this crisis, he walked away when we should be dealing with these problems. I think that's shameful. We're determined to deal with these issues. And I think we have to get on with it.
But you know that people will say in January it cost £55 million for 280,000 people on benefits to get £200. So why not try to give them a bit more help, targeted help, rather than handing money to people who can cope with a bit of squeeze, getting cash that they frankly don't need?
Well, Mark, you know the Northern Ireland Executive as well as I do. People will have to wait for month after month after month. This time next year, we'll be sitting waiting for this scheme to be designed if we leave it over to the Executive. What we have to do is get money into people's pockets right now. We are absolutely talking about targeting those who need it most. We're talking about giving people money, free school meals money, the kids get the meals in school, giving them money so they can get meals at home. People out there who can't put food on the table should be prioritised. But we also know that many people out there who aren't on benefits, Mark, and I'm speaking to them, many people out there who aren't on benefits are struggling. They're going out to work and they're coming home and they can't even put the heating on. I think that's a disgrace in the modern world, and I think those people need help as well. So the SDLP are determined to help all of those people. Of course, we need politicians to sit down after this election.
There's a danger, is there not, in raising the expectations of those people who really need serious help at the moment? Because A, the help might not be substantial enough, and B, there's still no guarantee that you could actually get that money to them anyway.
Well, we could if politicians went to work. If people voted for politicians who want to go to work, we're absolutely determined to do it. We wanted to do it before the Assembly came down. In fact, last autumn, we were talking about these kinds of ideas when the DUP and Sinn Féin did nothing about it. So, let's remember, we did have an Executive through many of these difficult months and nothing was done, despite some of us shouting loudly for it to be done. But others sat in their hands and now we're in a crisis, we're in an emergency. But we have an opportunity, Mark, in this election to vote for politicians like the SDLP candidates right across the north who are absolutely determined to get their sleeves rolled up, to get on with the job, to put money in people's pockets and to help them during this crisis. Other people want to walk away, Mark.
All right, fair enough.
Don't do that.
OK, I want to ask you about an interview you gave at the start of the week on Good Morning Ulster, in which you said you wanted to use Stormont's new power on corporation tax to lower it to help create jobs. That's been an issue that we've discussed on programmes like this for years. As you know very well, a reduction in corporation tax would mean the Treasury cutting the money it gives to Northern Ireland. So how much of a cut could you live with, and which services would you cut as a result of that?
Well, first of all, that is a long-term plan that we've been talking about for many years. The reality is, and I go to America, I speak to these investors, I speak to companies all over the world, and we have to work a whole lot harder to get jobs into Northern Ireland because the competition, the South, we shouldn't be competing, we should be working together. They have 12.5% corporation tax. They've also invested massively in the university.
But what would you cut? My question was, what would you cut?
Give me
I want you to answer the question.
I'm going to answer the question if you just let me explain why I support that. What I support is investment in skills. That means invest in universities. We send a university worth of students away every year. That's our best and brightest, and they never come home. We should also be dealing with fiscal policy to allow have that attractive tool in our box so we can go to America on the same level as the South goes and attract these companies.
Yeah.
Now, there's a
conversation. I've heard you say that before.
I'm going to answer your question now.
Okay, so please do. What would you cut? Because to have that benefit on corporation tax, the Treasury is going to say you're going to have to take a cut.
Look,
so I'm asking you, what would you cut?
I give up tickets to Derry Girl Premier today to come here and talk to you. So I'll just try and answer one of these questions if you let me. We have to talk to the Treasury about this. Treasury come up with these big figures. What you should do is you taper it down so we can see the benefit. If you cut corporation tax today, you would not see the benefit for a number of years. So we would be saying to Treasury, we would only do that if we had the opportunity to spread that out over a longer period so we could see the benefit. And the benefit is we get more jobs. The benefit is we get to keep more of our young people here and we get
So you're not going to answer the question. You haven't told me what you'd cut. Because you would have to cut.
No, you wouldn't have to cut anything.
No, you told me you'd taper over a long period of time.
Yes.
You'd have to cut. You'd have to take money away from something else.
Why do you have to cut up front? Why can we not say to the Treasury, and why will Treasury not say to us, this is an investment, they can take the slack because they can afford it.
Well,
in the immediate, in the short term.
Why has that not been done?
Well, ask the Finance Minister. I don't know where it's gone. I don't know what
they've ever floated that before. That's never been on the table.
I've been floating it for years, Mark.
Okay, let's talk about TransLink. They want a 6% pay rise. Do you support them? Because you've said you support nurses getting 6%.
Well, I want to see all frontline workers, and remember, bus drivers got us through the most difficult of times through COVID. They went to work every day in very dangerous circumstances during the pandemic. Of course, I support all workers getting fair pay for a fair day's work. What I think should happen right now is TransLink and the unions should get into a room and thrash this out, because the last thing we need is a strike. But we support the workers' right to strike. We support the workers' right to look for fair pay and fair conditions. Absolutely, 100%. Of course, that has to be negotiated between the employer and the union side, and we always take that position.
It's going to be very difficult for people if that TransLink strike goes ahead for a period of a week, isn't it?
That's why we should try and avoid it by having the two sides in a room thrashing out those issues and making sure that at the end of it we have a sustainable package.
But that's ideal, but you might not get that solution. You might actually have a situation where the strike happens.
We might have anything, but you're asking me what we should do. The strike isn't scheduled for another couple of weeks. What I'm saying is the two sides get into a room and make sure that workers are paid properly. And if
it can't be avoided, would you support strike action?
If it can't be avoided, workers are entitled to go on strike if they think they haven't got a fair deal.
What's your message then to the people, to the parents of children whose school runs would be disrupted, to the people who might be wanting to take advantage of a period over the Christmas, of the Easter holidays, to see friends and family, people who couldn't go to work?
Well, what my message is, the two sides get into a room and thrash this out because of those things you've just outlined. I also think, though, there are big issues for workers, there are big issues for bus drivers that need to be resolved as we go through the next number of years. And that won't be resolved by not getting into a room and thrashing out the issues. That's how you resolve these disputes. But of course, as a last resort, workers are entitled to strike if they feel like they have to.
All right, OK, let's talk about planning. You've said you want to talk about delivery and focus on that because you think the SDLP has delivered in government. And you said more MLAs means more SDLP
That's
ministers.
That's how it works, yeah.
OK, so you want to show you're a party that can deliver for people. Let's look at your party's management, specifically of the infrastructure brief. 2 reports on the planning system have been published in recent weeks and shine a light on that process. Just let me quote from Stormont's Public Accounts Committee from just a few short weeks ago. The department is not currently providing the strong leadership needed to drive transformational change within the planning system. The committee is very concerned that the department does not grasp the severity of issues facing the planning system, does not recognise the urgent need for change, and has a poor understanding of its role in implementing change. That is pretty damning, is it not?
Well, we're under no illusions that the planning system needs an awful lot of work, and the Minister has said that many times. In the 2 short years that she's been in there, she's got planning decisions out the door. Like Casement Park, for example, that has sat in there for an awful long time. It's a major, major opportunity for Gaelic Games in Ulster to finally get a home of its own, a proper, full-scale home of its own. Nicola Mallon made that happen, and a number of other planning applications as well. We are absolutely in no doubt and under no illusions that the system itself needs an awful lot of work, that that's not going to get done in a year or two, and we need support from parties right across the executive to get that done.
That criticism didn't come from the PAC in isolation, because the Audit Office had a recent report that found similar problems. Some of them which took place before the Minister came in. So when she came into office, she should have known about them. And surely now she should have done something about it. Let's just listen to specifically what that Audit Office report said. It said there were considerable risks for the system. This is the planning system, where councils did not explain necessarily why decisions had been overturned. Planners' recommendations were overturned by councils. The Audit Office said there were considerable risks for the system. It added there was a risk of irregularity and possible fraudulent activity. We've concerns that this is an area which has limited transparency. Again, a department with an SDLP minister in charge.
I think what you just quoted to me was issues within councils, unless
But the Minister's responsible for planning.
Yes, and she can't take
every decision. Well, councils are part of the planning process.
The Minister is actually responsible for taking decisions on strategic planning applications. Councils are responsible for basically every other application. Of course, we have issues around how some of that is done. I think we need to be very careful about banding around the word fraudulent, but we want to see things done more efficiently.
Well, that's a direct quote from the report.
Yes, I know, but it was talking about councillors. It was talking about councils right across Northern Ireland. Of course, we don't control very many of those.
It said possible fraudulent activity. Yeah. And it didn't name any councillor.
No, it didn't name the department or the minister. It's talking about issues within councils. And I think the system is a new system relatively. It isn't working to its full capacity.
But you know what it did say? Do you know what that report did say? It said the rates are so high in some areas that immediate action is necessary. Yeah. Immediate action by the department, by the minister.
Well, we do have a democratic system in Northern Ireland where local councillors get to make decisions around planning. Does it work to its full capacity? Absolutely not. I speak to developers every single day who think it's far easier to get stuff done and stuff through in Scotland and England, and we have to address that. But it isn't just the Minister. The Minister makes a tiny, tiny percentage of those decisions. Most of those decisions are made by local councillors, and we have to streamline all of that. We have to get moving on it, and we have to make sure decisions are being made in accordance with planning policy.
But the Minister is ultimately responsible for the decision-making process. I mean, ministers are very quick to take credit and get their photographs taken when something works. Surely they also have to take responsibility when things don't go right. It's as simple as that. And if you want to go to the polls saying, we are a party that delivers, vote for us, the more ministers we have in place, the better the delivery will be. It's just interesting to read those reports which are critical of your minister's department.
I listened to what you read out, and what they were critical of mostly was local councils' decision-making. I agree with that. We agree with that. It drives us mad at times. But, the Minister who makes a tiny percentage of those decisions can't be held accountable for decisions that are made by councillors in Belfast or Derry
it's about the system that the Minister oversees.
Well, the system
anybody can read these reports in detail.
I remember that system being created.
About the department.
Yeah, I remember that system being created. I sat in the committee around all of that. And it was divvied up between Sinn Féin and the DUP. It was around RPA, the Review of Public Administration. We had big issues around how all of that was being done.
It's an SDLP minister we're talking about.
You're actually talking about councils across Northern Ireland, Mark. So if you want to talk about stuff we're responsible for, we're happy to talk about it.
These reports are specifically looking at the work of the department.
The quotes that you read me out are about councils and deficiencies within councils.
One of them had no mention of councils. The second one referenced councils in a system managed by an SDLP minister.
I told you, we absolutely understand the planning. The planning system needs a lot of work, but that includes councils and councillors taking responsibility
from the minister, who will still have responsibility.
Well, hopefully,
unless or until somebody else takes over.
Hopefully, Nicola Mallon will still have responsibility after May the 5th. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about health. And when we get to the other side of the election, and when the need for health reform and what needs to be done in terms of centralising or moving services is raised, just to be clear, will your party support that?
Well, we've said 1,000 times we should support it. Now, are there going to be issues in local constituencies? Do you give a blank cheque to every single change? No, you don't. But what we have to do is take tough decisions. Now, that doesn't mean, and I think sometimes this has been badly explained, that doesn't mean closing services in local communities. It means changing how we give services to local communities, where we place services, how we use buildings, how we do all of that. And I've said many times that I'm up for that conversation. I'm up for working with other political parties, no matter who they are, and trying to make sure that we can get review. Because the most important thing, Mark, is that people get access to services. Right now, I have people in my constituency office who are waiting 4 and 5 years for simple operations. They're being driven into the private sector. That should never happen in a place that's supposed to have a national health service.
There is potentially an issue of mixed messaging here. I'll come on to what Colin McGrath told me on Sunday Politics a while ago. But what is your explanation for elected representatives from the SDLP in South Down who are lobbying for a cross-border solution to health issues, whenever what we need to be looking at, presumably, is about the reform of the healthcare system within Northern Ireland?
You cannot do both.
But there is an immediate and pressing need for transformation within the NHS in Northern Ireland.
Well, of course there is, and we support that. But I also know what's happening in Altnagalvin, where we're properly coordinating across the border, and it has made massive efficiencies. It means that people don't have to come from north, east Donegal, go down to Galway for certain things, and we should do much, much more of that. The idea of a cross-border working right across the border areas is a very good one. It can complement and work with...
That's the point. Complement.
But it can work with a proper review of how we organise the NHS in the north. We're all for that. But we can't just blink our eyes and pretend that there isn't a whole group of people who live just a mile over the border.
So what if there is a plan that is put on the table by the trusts, by the department in Northern Ireland that says, here are the changes that need to happen to make a more efficient service?
We look at it.
You'll look at it, but what will you say to those elected representatives?
Do you want me to give a blank cheque for
what will you say to those elected representatives in the SDLP who say, well, actually, we don't like that proposal because we think it denudes us of some of our services. We want to look at it in a broader context,
a bit like democracy,
which would slow things down.
It sounds a bit like democracy. Let me tell you now, I will give an absolute commitment that the SDLP will take very difficult decisions for the greater good for all of the people of Northern Ireland that I think will help make sure that we get access to services much quicker. That's the most important thing. Will we give a blank cheque to every single change that somebody proposes that we haven't seen in advance? Well, I don't know of anybody who would do that, Mark, and I don't think you should expect me to do it either.
But at the same time, can you give a guarantee, and I don't think this is unreasonable to ask, will you give a guarantee that no objections to change based on local political concerns in isolation will be tolerated by the leadership of the SDLP?
We have always said that any local concerns have to add up to making an impact across the whole sector. In other words, we don't think that you can say to parts of Northern Ireland, we're taking away all your services just because you're far away. We think we can actually develop services, new types of services in those buildings, and nobody actually is saying we should be closing buildings now. They're all saying we should be using them better. That's what we're saying.
So Colin McGrath...
But we've also done things, Mark, like invest in the road network to make sure that people can get around this place better, because if you're living up a country lane somewhere, it can be very, very difficult to get access to any service, no matter how close it is to you.
OK, so Colin McGrath, who's your party's health spokesperson on Sunday Politics back in December, said to me, and it's worth quoting, the Bengoa report was very clear. It's not where we deliver services, it's how we deliver services and how we do it best. And he also said we can organise it where nobody will be left out, but everybody is able to get the top-class services they need, albeit, and this is critical, albeit that they need to travel a certain distance to get it. Are you happy with that? And will you tell your representatives who argue that they have to travel too far, that they just might have to make that compromise?
They don't argue that. When you're sitting in a context where they are seeing in their own facilities, in their own communities, services being cut and cut and cut, and nothing being put in their place, well, of course they're right. But if we're talking about a broader approach, like the Bengoa approach, when people can see the benefits of change, absolutely, it's much easier to bring people with. Never mind politicians. We have to bring the community with us when we're trying to make massive change like this. And the best way to do that is to show them the change and the positive change that they will get as a result.
All right, OK. Absolutely. We're out of time. We need to leave it there. Colin Eastwood, thanks very much indeed for coming in to join us. Let's find out what Suzanne Breen and Alex Kane make of what they've just heard. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us again on the programme. Suzanne, what do you make of Colin Eastwood's pitch tonight?
Well, I think he'll be quite happy talking about SDLP policy. He won't be annoyed that he gave up his ticket to Derry Girls Premier to do that. I think all politicians, when it comes to health reform, are going to be in a tricky position because voters are putting pressure on local representatives to save services and not to have them downgraded for centralised establishments. But the leadership of the parties know the very hard decisions that have to be taken. I thought it was interesting that he came out very strongly in favour of people's right to strike. The SDLP is keen in this election to stress its social democratic credentials, that it is the party of John Hume. Perhaps difference to Alliance, the SDLP would be more left of centre. So I think Colm Eastwood made that pitch. He also strongly defended Nicola Mallon. Across the parties, at Stormont, there would be a belief that she has been a good minister, in fact perhaps to the detriment of playing a larger role on the political stage and maybe more high profile in her constituency. But you know, from everybody right across the spectrum that I talk to, they do believe that Nicola Mallon is delivering or has delivered.
Alex, what do you make of what you just heard? What stood out for you in what Mr Eastwood had to say?
Well, I think Suzanne is correct, Mark, that I think it was a good pitch from Colm. I think he covered a number of areas and covered them well. The problem is, if you look at the opinion poll and if you take anecdotal evidence as well, an awful lot of people don't seem to care about the executive. They don't really rate it. When you ask them, you know, the history of the executive, what it's done, has it delivered for them, has it touched on all the bases that matter in their everyday lives, the message comes back over and over again, no, it hasn't. And while Colm may make a good pitch there, and I do say it was a good pitch, I'm not sure it's going to resonate at all with his own voters or people he wants to win over, because the problem is, I think so many people don't expect the executive to deliver anything. And some of the things he's talked about wanting to do, this is trying to get a dysfunctional executive to agree on some of this stuff. So no matter how much he says, we will do this, the SDLP is committed to this, he knows that getting an agreement around the table, particularly from the Sinn Féin and the Sinn Féin and the DUP, is going to be enormously difficult and probably
but Alex,
impossible.
We're not sure, because in an interview I did with Colm Eastwood just a couple of weeks ago after his party conference, he said he could not be clear, he could not say absolutely 100% that the SDLP would go back into an executive on the other side of an election, because there had to be a process of negotiation first.
Well, all the parties will say that. Doug Beattie said it to you on Sunday. They have to negotiate. I would be very surprised, and occasionally I am in Northern Ireland politics, but I would be very surprised if the opportunity presented itself to the SDLP to go back into the executive, particularly since Colm has talked about what he wants to do. And Nicola Mallon has been a good minister, so it would be, I think, almost nonsensical to say, oh, well, we can't reach any agreement, so we're not even going to put her in the executive. So I think, yes, for what I can understand why he's saying it, but my own suspicion would be that when it comes to it, if an executive is rebooted, I would be very surprised if the SDLP wasn't there.
Suzanne, interesting, at the same time that the SDLP is pitching itself as the anti-DUP party, and we heard Colm Eastwood criticising the DUP again tonight, a senior DUP strategist last night was telling voters to transfer to the SDLP and Alliance as an anti-Sinn Féin vote on May the 5th.
I think for the DUP, really, it's needs must. I saw Richard Bullock's tweets. I think the DUP are desperate. The SDLP is probably strongest in this election when it is being critical of the DUP. Nicola Mallon's line at party conference, which was vote for Jeffrey Donaldson's party and get Jamie Bryson's politics, was popular with nationalist voters. And I think the broad swathe of nationalist voters are probably more comfortable when the SDLP is attacking the DUP than when it's going for Sinn Féin, even though obviously Colm Eastwood clearly has to do that. Sometimes the policies of Sinn Féin and the SDLP don't appear to be that different. There is clear red, white and blue water between the UUP, the DUP and the TUV, whereas the difference between the SDLP and Sinn Féin really seems at times to be a difference regarding the past and a difference of style. But Colm Eastwood has regularly said that Sinn Féin has failed to deliver in this executive, and he'll continue to make that pitch to his voters.
Alex, just briefly, if you would, on this, because we're nearly out of time. What did you make of what Richard Bullock was saying on Twitter last night? Did you raise your eyebrows?
Well, no, I've stopped raising my eyebrows now what the DUP are doing. I think there is a hint of desperation. And the reality, of course, is if there's an alternative to the DUP and Sinn Féin, it has to be alliance, the UUP and the SDLP, make that gain, that swell in the centre ground. But the DUP asking SDLP people, to switch the votes here, there and everywhere, it does just smack of desperation.
OK, we'll leave it there, folks. We'll speak to you again at the end of the programme. Thank you very much to Suzanne and Alex for now. Let's turn to the TUV and its efforts to increase its representation at Stormont. The party had one MLA in the last mandate, its leader, Jim Allister, who joins me now. Welcome to the programme. You clearly want to fight this election on the protocol. You say that's the real issue of concern for unionism. Are you sure about that?
I am sure about that because the union is jeopardised by the protocol. This is a protocol which decrees that Great Britain, the other part of our union, is a foreign country, and therefore its goods must be subject to foreign customs codes and tariffs and checks. Now, there's no more dramatic illustration of the constitutional impact of the protocol than that. And if there's any doubt about that, then what the Court of Appeal said puts it beyond doubt. It said that the protocol subjugates Article 6 of the Act of Union. What is our union? It's an economic union. It's a political union. The economic union is Article 6, which is supposed to guarantee unfettered trade between and within. The Court of Appeal is saying that has been subjugated, overridden, vanquished by the protocol. So, of course, it is a direct perilous attack upon the very fabric of the union.
That is your very personal and specific interpretation of what that really means and what the impact might be of the protocol on the union. The problem is for you, surely, your vision of the union has never been shared by mainstream unionism at any stage. If that was the case, the TUV would have done much better at the polls down the years. Do you think it's going to be different this time?
We didn't have the protocol at previous polls in its manifestations that we now have. I do think that unionists are correctly exercised about this assault on the union. And I do think that unionists see that it is TUV that identified the issues right from the beginning, when some others were talking foolishly about there being sensible proposals in the protocol, about there being opportunities, about there being the best of both worlds. It was TUV that was saying, this is a direct assault and betrayal of the union. And I think that has been borne out. And I think that gives TUV the wind at its back in terms of the protocol.
But if you look down through the years, I was just looking at manifesto titles. When you look at them down the years, you've always had something that you've not been happy about. 2010, putting it right.
There's much not to be happy
2015, the real alternative. 2016, straight-talking principled politics. Then we had drain the swamp. Then we had telling as it is. So there's always been something that you've been uncomfortable about.
Well, there's much to be uncomfortable
and that you've thought threatened the union.
Take this Stormont. This Stormont has limped from crisis to crisis. There's a very simple reason why this Stormont, as constituted, will never work. And it's this. Sinn Féin is not there to make Northern Ireland work. So you can dress that up as much as you like, but when you strip it down to the reality, that is the fact.
Yeah, well, except
and
therefore, Michelle O'Neill says that she hopes that she'll come back and be in the executive and be First Minister.
Well, let me just finish the point. Therefore, when you create a system of government which can only exist by the grace and favour of Sinn Féin, and Sinn Féin doesn't want the very province to exist, then it's no surprise that system is.
So your point is that the protocol presents a real and present existential threat to the union. Are you admitting then, if the TUV doesn't make a breakthrough at this election under these circumstances, that's it?
No, I'm not, because it's not just TUV that is saying the protocol is wrong. We're saying it loud and clear. We're saying it very emphatically.
It's of more concern to TUV voters than to other unionists. I mean,
I think it is.
The most recent Lucid Talk poll suggested 74% of TUV voters are concerned about the protocol. That's 47% for the DUP and 22% for the UUP.
Of course,
so it's a specific TUV worldview.
Well, I think it is a unionist worldview, and it may be particularly focused in respect of TUV voters. But of course, I want to maximise our support, and I want to greatly disappoint the BBC by getting extra seats.
Well, I'm sure the BBC doesn't have a view on
Well, I
whether
think
you
they
get
do.
extra seats or don't get extra seats.
Well,
The
I think
issue is
they
that you
do.
keep making the same point about the threats of the union and it doesn't hit home. Your 2016 Assembly manifesto said, you've seen in Jim Allister what one determined TUV voice can achieve in the Assembly. Just think of the potential of multiple TUV MLAs. You won 24,000 votes, 3.4% and 1 seat. 2017, you said a vote for the TUV was unionist voters' best insurance policy. TUV alone offers the radical change that Northern Ireland has been crying out for. 20,000 votes, 2.6% and 1 seat. What makes you think it'll be any different this time?
And all you have in this interview, Mark, is, from your perspective, an opportunity to deride, to demean TUV and the people who vote for us. Now, if you think that doesn't send, if you think that,
just like I did with Colum Eastwood.
no, if you think
Those aren't
that,
my figures.
if you think that isn't
Those are
sending,
the
if you
electorate
think that
figures.
isn't sending a very clear message that you and the BBC are in the business of trying to demean the people who vote for me,
certainly not
then,
demeaning.
you know,
but looking
you
at the
ha-
facts and asking you why you think that the direction of travel will be different this time. I think
Because
that's a perfectly reasonable question.
I do believe that the protocol has motivated people. I do believe the more we see of Stormont, the more they realise that the party that says this Stormont will never work,
Right.
that mandatory coalition is a total failure because you don't have to have agreed about anything in order to be in government. I think the more people see the failure of Stormont, the more they recognise the wisdom of what we've been saying.
Okay, so let me ask you this straightforward question. What would a good day at the polls be in 4 weeks' time for Jim Allister and the TUV? A doubling of your representation to 2 seats, or do you believe you'll get 3 or 4 or 5 or 6? Put a number on it.
Well, I'm not going to put a number on it because it's in the hands of the electorate. What I'm saying to the electorate is, if you're happy with what you got, vote for the same again. Because if you vote for the same again, that's exactly what you'll get. You won't be disappointed. But if you're not happy with what you've got, then it's no good just to hope for change. You need to vote for change. And it's by voting for TUV that you demonstrate this Stormont cannot continue as is, this protocol cannot continue, and that you make it clearer than you could by voting for anyone else that TUV is the voice for you.
Okay.
And I think within that, you will see a growth in TUV support.
Okay, and I'm not surprised that you would say that. If you won't put a number on the number of seats that you think you will go back with, you won't even tell me what you would like to go back with, is it fair for me...
Back with as many as possible.
Okay, but you won't put a number on it.
Well, I can't put a number on it because I don't know what the electorate is going to do.
You could tell me what you think realistically is achievable.
Well, I do believe that we have had a significant rise, sustained in credible polls over recent times, and I do believe that will be reflected in the polls. And if it is, then I will not be alone in Stormont. And I do, without apology, make the point that people have seen what one TUV MLA could do. I think many could do much more.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that if you go back on your own as the sole TUV representative after the election on May the 5th, that would be a sign of failure if the threat to the union is as great as you maintain it is?
Well,
that's a fair assumption.
Going back without anyone would be total failure. Yeah. Going back with only one would be relative failure, and that would be disappointing for me, but ecstasy for the BBC.
Okay. A senior DUP figure was on Twitter last night. I mentioned this earlier. I just want to ask you about it, suggesting his party supporters should transfer to other pro-union parties after the DUP and then, depending on the constituency concerned, also give preferences to the SDLP and Alliance to stop Sinn Féin picking up seats it could be prevented from taking. Would you urge TUV voters to do the same?
I'm urging voters to vote for anti-protocol, pro-union candidates. I think there's a sufficient breadth of appeal there to encompass the needs of the unionist community. So I'm not advocating anyone to vote for a pro-protocol, pro-Republican, pro-nationalist candidate. Of course I'm not.
OK, but Richard Bullock from the DUP did precisely that on Twitter last
night.
The
DUP is the party that has sustained Sinn Féin in government since 2007, so maybe no surprise.
OK, well the DUP is the party that won 225,000 votes at the last Stormont election. Earlier this year, the government announced plans for a return of double jobbing, something that you were very clear you were opposed to. When you were invited to sign a letter alongside other party leaders, you declined, and a spokesperson for you said you wouldn't sign anything along with Michelle O'Neill or any other Sinn Féin figure. That's fair enough, isn't it?
That is fair enough.
OK. But just a few months earlier, you were happy to sign an anti-protocol pledge and appear shoulder to shoulder in a promotional video with Councillor Billy Hutchinson, the PUP leader, who is an unrepentant, self-confessed double murderer. How do you justify that?
Well, let's be very clear. What I did in September was sign a declaration of unalterable rejection of the protocol.
And he was also one of the signatories.
He also signed that. That's a matter for him. But his status and his position does not taint or alter my position.
Yeah, but the same logic you're employing for signing that could have been employed for signing the letter alongside Michelle O'Neill about double jobbing, but you wouldn't, and I'm just asking you why not.
Well, TUV has no truck with Sinn Féin or those who continue to justify the vicious, vile murders of our citizens. And that, of course, is sadly the continuing position of Sinn Féin, a justification of a terrorist campaign which saw many people left fatherless and bereft. I've no apology to make for not wanting to give those individuals any sort of leg up in any sort of situation.
And of course, both of the parties are now clearly wedded to the peace process. They make that very clear in their literature. Well, indeed, they do say. But also, Billy Hutchinson has made it clear in a number of interviews recently, because he published a book, that he is unrepentant for the actions they took back in the 1970s.
That is absolutely
But you were
shameful.
prepared. That's my point.
Yeah,
You were prepared.
Yeah. And you are prepared.
To stand alongside him in a video and sign a letter and perhaps open the charge of hypocrisy from your political opponents, no?
And you, Mark, are prepared to dredge anything to try and get some dirt to stick to TUV. But people know that TUV has principle, we have integrity, and try as you might, you will not tarnish that.
OK, one final quick question. In 2016, you said you were too young to retire. You are now 69, as I understand it. Will you serve a full 5-year term if you're returned on May the 5th?
None of us can guarantee our health or indeed our mortality. But I'm putting myself again before the electorate of North Antrim, inviting them to elect me as their servant in the Assembly. If they do that, I will serve them.
OK, we will leave it there. Jim Allister, thanks very much indeed for coming in to join us. Again, let's hear from Suzanne Breen and Alex Kane. Alex, I'll give you first dibs on this one. What do you think the Unionist electorate broadly will make of the pitch made by Jim Allister tonight? Well,
I think the thing about Jim, he doesn't do nuance. He doesn't do ambiguity. And this may come as something of a shock to non-Unionists. Jim is actually respected across huge sections of unionism. They respect the battle he took over the protocol. His problem is, and it always was going to be a problem, that my own gut instinct is that even though they might admire him, even though they stand with him on the protocol, even though they like the fact that he has been there right the way through in the past decade pointing out the problems of this, when it comes to voting on May the 5th, I still think the vast majority of them will be more fixated or focused on our Sinn Féin First Minister. And even though they probably do agree with Jim, and this is across unionist parties, even though they probably do agree with his analysis, that in itself won't be enough to get him the votes he needs to build into the traction he's been looking for in the past 8 months or so.
Suzanne, what do you make of what you just heard?
I agree with Alex. Jim has had 15 years to build the TUV. I certainly think that this is his best chance. The polls have been consistent. Even the worst polls have the TUV on twice the figure that it won in the last Assembly election. Jim's problem still is that there aren't 18 Jim Allisters, that some of his candidates are of a decent enough calibre. Some, I would suggest, perhaps aren't. The other big problem for Jim Allister is what the DUP are hoping for is that the BT bounce is flattening and the TUV bubble balloon will burst. And between now and the election, the DUP will really be playing very strongly to people's emotions. And there's a belief there that maybe people will go in, unionist voters will go in the privacy of the ballot box, they will hold their nose and they will vote for the DUP.
All right, need to leave it there, folks. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us. That is it for tonight. I'll be back with Sunday Politics at the usual time of 10 o'clock on BBC One. Do join me for that. And finally, one of the big stories of the week was the UK government's plans to privatise Channel 4, and quite a few people had a view on it, including the comedian Rosie Holt. From everyone in the team, thanks for watching. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
It's owned by the government, yet the government gets nothing from it. It holds the government to account. It mocks the government. It's frightful. Sometimes, Mike, these democratic societies really do make me sick.
I mean, the government can't even run the government, never mind running anything else.
Yes, see, we can hold the government to account, can't we, Mike? No one is cancelling Channel 4. This is not cancel culture, which we abhor. No, but it is consequent culture. And you can't expect to replace Boris Johnson with a block of ice on national TV and get away with it. All these Tory MPs like Jeremy Hunt coming forward and saying we must not privatise Channel 4. Hello, you're Tories, you love privatisation. Stay in your lane. This is socialism. Don't do the nuance thing. The nuance thing is ridiculous.